Alright, so in this video we're going to look at allowances, aka PC, prime cost, or PS, provisional sum, amounts within your estimate and how BuildExact handles it. We're going to have a look at what that means for selections later on. We'll look at the redistribution, which is a fancy way of saying what do we do with the markup for these allowance items. And then we'll also touch on specifications and timeline items. So into my account over here, I'm going to quickly put in some just arbitrary numbers against a few of these allowance items, and we're going to talk first of all about the allowances and the PC items. So quick intro, if you're not across really what PS is, I use the term allowance to cover them both, but PC is a prime cost, which is an item that's yet to be selected or a cost for an item that's not yet known. So it could be that, hey, you're giving a quote to someone and you have no idea what type of oven you want, so you just put a reasonable amount in as an allowance to get the quote put together. Provisional sum, on the other hand, is generally less about individual items and more about work to be completed. So a common one we see, or common examples we'd see, would be demolition, because you don't know if you are going to find asbestos once you start ripping stuff apart. Excavation's another one, because you don't know, if there's giant boulders where you're going to dig a hole. So it's to try and cover yourself for fluctuations in price, or to add placeholders where the full value is not really known yet. Now, if I need to tag something as a PS allowance item, it's this button here. You'll notice the next button comes on as well, which I'm going to cover in a second in way more detail. But the short answer of why this happens is when we are putting an allowance item into an estimate and subsequently the client's quote, the client could foreseeably take that quote to, say, Bunnings and walk around and compare cooktops. For that reason, we don't want the markup to be in there in that figure that the client sees for this item, because we want them to be able to compare apples with apples and make sure they're getting a cooktop that is roughly around the allowance amount so they don't owe us too much extra money. Because of that, we have to put the markup somewhere. And this button here will be either an E, an N, or a C. By default, it's a C. And the meaning of each of those ones is N is no markup movement, just leave the markup as it is. As I go through them, you can actually see this quote total figure move. So N, no markup moving. I can click in here and see that it's still got its full markup. C, which is the default, means move the markup to other stuff in the same category. So you'll see this item has no markup because the markup has been pushed into the other items. And if I click on those, I'll see redistribution from other items, show breakdown. It's inheriting, if you like, $100 from the cooktop. The third one, E, and I should note that C is my preference on this because I like to keep markup localized to each category. E does get used. E is moving the markup to everything in the estimate. So that means the markup could foreseeably go from appliances to plaster. I like to keep it local because I like to, if I'm making changes to this, not have markup kind of fluctuate in other categories. But that's really just my preference. Perfect. So as we're doing this, I want to make a note to what's going to happen to these allowance items moving forward. So naturally, they'll go into the estimate and the quote for the client. If we win this job, and this is fast forwarding a little bit, there'll be a selections area in the job part of BuildExact. Everything that was an allowance will automatically add to selections. So for PS items, we put them all in there in the case that you want to give the client some options to choose from. If the client's just going to go and pick whatever they pick and that's what happens, then we're still going to put in selections, but you may use selections differently when you get to there. The main job to be done right now is just telling the client which ones are allowances. Now, we've talked about the markup moving, and we've talked about how we can see that moving around. So we've covered off that. One point I do want to make, and this is kind of covering off a question here, is as you go and toggle all of these, you'll notice the markup down the bottom stays absolutely the same. So this is really just a concern question people come to us with. Hey, look, as I do allowances, am I losing markup? No, you're not. In fact, the whole point is that we keep the markup there for you. We're just moving it around so we can show raw figures to your customer. All right, so on to some other things in here. S and T from here. So when we're chatting to people and onboarding them, we often get the question, what are all the little random buttons do? So I'm going to cover the rest of the remaining 2 random buttons here. Think of these buttons as, I've given it a price, I've given it some markup, what else do I want to do with it? Because these are really controlling where else are we going to use a particular item. So S relates to specifications. We haven't really talked about that yet. So although there's another video entirely on it, I'll give you a quick summary. When we get into the quote, we kind of have basically two options. We can show the client information from the estimate cost screen, and we have heaps of choice around whether we show prices, whether we show $0 items, etc. The second option is we can show the list from the specifications. The main difference is estimate costings is whatever wording you've put in here, that's what the client sees, and it shows them pretty much everything with the price. Specifications is a better option if you want to just be more picky around what you tell the client. And I explain it generally that it's not hiding things, it's kind of just highlighting what's important. So a great example is if you've got joist hangers listed as a priced item, client probably doesn't care. They just want to know that the floor is going to hold up. They just want to know about the things that are important to them. So it is personal preference. I'll show you both ways. But simply put, if you hit this as an S button, it pulls into the specifications, and you should definitely save it when you go there. And it starts to list this out. In the other video on specifications, we'll talk way more about other things you can do with it. And last button here, timeline. So T for time refers to the schedules. So what we're doing here is saying, hey, when I start using these schedules, which items do I want there? And a quick note that there is 2 schedules. One is in the estimate phase in here. And this is really good if you're going to just prepare a schedule for the client with your proposal. There is also a schedule in the job section, which is much more about keeping stuff on track and assigning tasks. And there's a separate video for each of those schedule areas. Perfect. Hopefully that makes sense. As always, any questions, let us know. And yeah, reach out. Thank you.